5.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation into law. 155 years ago, we decry all forms of racial, social, and economic injustice. We have been celebrating this Galveston event here at historic Ashton Villa for the past 41 years, thanks to Al Edwards and Reverend James B. Thomas. This Ashton Villa mansion once served as the living quarters for the Confederate Army on Galveston Island. That is why the state of Texas Juneteenth Committee erected this statue behind me in honor of State Representative Al Edwards of Houston, who sponsored the legislation making Juneteenth a state paid holiday in 1979, signed into law by then Texas Governor Bill Clemens. On June 19, 2006, the state of Texas and the city of Galveston dedicated this beautiful lawmaker statue, which cost over $100,000 in honor of Al Edwards' legislative leadership in getting the Texas Juneteenth holiday passed and signed into law in 1979. We have placed a floral wreath today in his memory in front of this statue to honor his life, because Al Edwards' earthly journey ended in April of this year. So today we come to celebrate Juneteenth and to recognize the vision and hard work of Al Edwards 41 years ago. We will now have the opening prayer by my good friend, Reverend Lewis Simpson, Jr., pastor of St. John Baptist Church.
Let us bow our head in prayer. Father, we come now saying thank you. Thank you for this day. Lord, we thank you because you're God, and you're God all by yourself. Lord, we pray for the Edwards family this day and this event. But, oh gracious and Heavenly Father, when I consider all the hatred in our world and the far-reaching pain and destruction racism has caused, I can easily become overwhelmed. But because of your word, because of who you are, Lord, your goodness and your grace, and in the truth and in prayer, let us enlist help from a creator and the sustainer of all that exists, the one with the power to change our world and to conquer evil. Through Christ, he is already advancing against oppression, and he is inviting both you and me, his children, to join him in this holy mission. Lord, may you bless our coming together this day, June 19, 2020. It's in your name we pray. Let us all say amen. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. To many of our out-of-town visitors, I want to tell you about my hometown of Galveston, which is rich in American history, especially African American history. Besides the historical event of Juneteenth, other historical elements in Galveston include Galveston Avenue L Baptist Church, which was the first African American slave church in the state of Texas, established in 1840. Galveston Central High School was the first African American high school in the state of Texas, started in 1885. Galveston University of Texas Medical Branch opened the first hospital in Texas for African Americans in 1902. UTMB had the first African American medical school doctor in Texas in 1949, 5 years before the landmark Brown versus Board of Education. Galveston Rosenberg Library started the first public library for African Americans in Texas in 1904. Texas, Galveston, Galveston Reedy Chapel A&ME Church held the first Juneteenth celebration in January 1, 1866. Next, we'll have greetings from my boss, good boss, Dr. Ben Raymer, University of Texas Medical Branch President ad interim. The largest employer in Galveston County with over 14,000 employees. He knew and worked with Representative Al Edwards and for more than 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. It's always good to be here at Ashton Villa for this particular occasion and this remembrance. It's particularly sad today not to look out on the crowd and see the smiling face of a real statesman, Representative Al Edwards. As the President ad interim from the University of Texas Medical Branch, I bring you greetings from our 14,000 employees who work not only here in Galveston but all around the state. Mr. Edwards did so much for our campus, and one has to wonder why on earth, because he was elected to represent district on the western side of Houston, so what did he have to do with us down here? Al liked to champion causes for education in particular. He liked to see diversity and inclusion. That last word, inclusion, especially. You know, at UTMB, we represent the most diverse medical school in the entire United States. It's not just that we graduated the first person of this race or this color or whatever. It's the fact that we have been doing that year after year after year. When others focus on symbolism at one point in time, UTMB has been able to embrace diversity among its graduates and students, among its employees, and among the causes of social justice that we champion as a group. A native Houstonian, Al fought to make Juneteenth a state holiday many decades before people were concerned about that. And not only did he fight to do that, he was very ecumenical in his ability to bring a crowd of people around him from other political parties and other thoughts and persuasions to unify them around different areas. I have seen him do that on our state budget on many occasions, where he was a force who brought people together to do the right thing. I want to thank his family for his lifelong service to the state of Texas, for his initiatives that support the historical importance and the knowledge that go into this particular celebration, but also for paving the way for so many others to have opportunity. The commitment of Al Edwards to the ideals of equality, justice, and inclusion is not new, nor is it a new ideal, as I have said, on UTMB's campus. Indeed, as Mr. Matthews mentioned, Dr. Herman Barnett was the first African-American medical student in Texas to obtain a degree, and that degree was given and awarded in 1953 here on the island to Dr. Herman Barnett, who not only served his country in a distinguished manner, as one of the famous Tuskegee Airmen, but also served the medical community in Houston for over 40 years. Many would say that UTMB was ahead of its time. Those of us who are carefully judging history say, no, we weren't. There never should have been an occasion for Gordon Granger to have to come to Galveston to free slaves to begin with. Should there have been? No, there should not have been. A sad but present plight in our history, and something that we have to do today to reconcile the history of America. Black lives do matter. They matter in a great way. People must have an opportunity for education. Education is a great equalizer. But along the way for an education, you have to have opportunity. And that opportunity means the way to get there. You've got to be included. You just can't go out and say we're diverse. You've got to be invited to the dance, and you've got to dance. You know, you can't just use symbolism all of our lives. It's great that we had the first library and this and that, but why do we even need separate libraries? We should have had one library from the very beginning. Isn't that right? Yes, it is. That's what Al Edwards was all about. A modest man. Senator Taylor, on the floor of the House of Representatives, there was a famous moment when UTMB was trying to recover from Hurricane Ike. And there was a person who walked to the front of the House and pulled down a tuition revenue bond that would have allowed us to build a building to restore the Jeannie Seeley Hospital. Stopped it dead in its tracks. Dan Branch was carrying a bill. You remember this. I called Al. Al was on the floor. Can't do that, but I found a backdoor way to do it. I called him. I said, can you do something? He said, just a minute. Al walked to the front, put his arm around a young lady from Dallas, talked to her a second, and she walked to the dais where the Speaker of the House was and pulled down her objection. Later on, I said, Al, what did you tell her? He said, in his very, very quiet way, he just looked at me and shook his head, and he said, I said, this is not your night. So if you want to look at it tomorrow, just go up there and do the right thing. And she did. Al made a difference in history. For us, it was a $150 million difference. It kept UTMB on this island. Many of you would not be employed today if this man had not made those steps forward and changed the course of history. Just as Al Edwards did, we need to do on a continued basis. UTMB is committed to recruiting the best of medical and nursing and allied health profession students it can. It is committed to finding a cure for COVID. It is committed to maintaining a healthy and dynamic population of workers at our university. And we owe that to people like Al Edwards and these people who represent you sitting on this first and second row. They are heroes. They put their life on the line to do the right thing for us, that we may enjoy the freedoms we have. We've got to make a commitment to each other to also take care of each other by upholding the principles of diversity and inclusion in all that we do. Or real heroes like Al Edwards will have lived a life without purpose. I believe he lived a life with great purpose. I believe that we as Galvestonians and Americans can really bring ourselves to a new level of inclusion and respect in our society. We must commit ourselves to do that. Justice, yes. Mr. Matthews, thank you for giving me the opportunity to represent the University of Texas Medical Branch.
Thank you, Dr. Raymer. Next, we'll have greetings from my good friend, Texas State Senator Larry Taylor, followed by another good friend, State Representative Mays Middleton.
Thank you, Doug. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this celebration here today as we celebrate freedom. I'm honored to represent historic Galveston Island, where this life-changing announcement was made 155 years ago. I've had the honor to attend a number of Juneteenth commemorations over the years, but this one, I know you will all agree, feels different without Al Edwards being here with us. We're all here today celebrating Juneteenth, because of Al Edwards, with whom I was privileged to serve in the House of Representatives from 2002 to 2007 and from 2009 to 2011. For me personally, he was a soft-spoken, humble man of God, always offering a genuine smile and a hand of friendship. With his demeanor and influence in the legislature, he was able to serve his district, his community, and this entire state so well for so many years. Al's career in politics began under Jimmy Carter and ended under Barack Obama in 2011, a testament of his service to his community and to his statesmanship. Our collective history will always reflect on Al Edwards' efforts as a freshman state legislator who pressed in until the final hours of his very first session to pass the Juneteenth holiday legislation that was signed by Governor Bill Clements. When later asked about it, Al said, "It says then that the whole state of Texas has put their stamp of acceptance on this day as an official day of acknowledgement. I can't imagine too many things more important to the human race, not just blacks, than coming out of slavery into freedom." I think we can all agree with that. The Juneteenth celebration is a time to reflect and honor all those who suffered and endured slavery and America's never-ending struggle to live up to its own principles. In today's celebration, we honor them and we honor the memory and service of our friend. As Al entered into his eternal home in heaven about 5 weeks ago, I could hear God say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And from those of us who remain here, thank you, Reverend Al Edwards, for a life well lived and a job well done. Your legacy lives on through this holiday, and your efforts will ensure this day is held sacred for generations to come. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. May God continue to lead us through this time of profound division and misunderstanding. There is still work to do, and I pray that leaders like Al will rise up to strengthen what remains and bind up the wounds still gaping. May we lean into the chasm of misunderstanding with extended trust and hope for healing. May we truly hear one another, being quick to listen and slow to speak, until all men and women of every heritage and background feel and experience the freedom that was so hard won by those who came before us. Quoting my good friend who's here with us, District Jack Rhodey, right here in Galveston County, his quote, "Our fight must not be with one another. It must be against racism itself, both as a sin of commission and omission, wherever it occurs." I think we agree with that. Thank you, Jack, for that great quote. The struggle that divides many among us is long, tedious, and painful, but I, along with you and the Texas State Senate, am committed to seeing it through. Thank you very much.
Well, name is Mace Middleton, and I'm honored to represent Galveston Island and this community in our Texas house. And seeing everybody here today, I think, is the best testament we could have to Al Edwards' life. You know, he taught 28 million Texans the importance of Juneteenth, and that's a legacy that I think our children, our grandchildren, and every future child in this state can forever be grateful for. And you know, today we celebrate June 19th, 1865, and General Granger's proclamation of something that was not just fundamentally right, it was not just fundamentally moral, it was something that God intended for all of his children, that we all be free, and that freedom belongs to all of us. Now more than ever, we must remember that our rights as humans are from God and not from government. And that means government should not get in the way of those rights. Freedom is right to life. Freedom is liberty. Freedom is private property. In trying times like these, we have to remember the sacrifices of those who came before us, like Al Edwards, and grant us the courage to do the next right thing, and that's continue the fight for equality of opportunity for all. Every child should have the same chance in life, and we often miss that mark. We know what our work must be. We know what our calling must be. Today we remember that our rights are from God and that his will was definitely done on June 19th, 1865. Let us continue to do his will and make sure that we have equality of opportunity for all.
Thank you. Next, we'll have greetings from Dr. Craig Brown, the City of Galveston Mayor Pro Tem, followed by greetings from Galveston NAACP President Mary Patrick, followed by Pete Henley, Board President of Old Central Cultural Center High School, which was the first African American high school in Texas, established in 1885.
Good morning, everyone. It is my honor to be here to represent the city of Galveston to welcome you to this 155th anniversary of Juneteenth. And it's my honor to not only represent the city, but the mayor and the residents of Galveston. Also, we have two city council members here this morning, Amy Bly and David Collins, who are here representing the city also. I would like to mention a few words before I read a proclamation from the city. And that is, we celebrate freedom, we celebrate independence in America, is July 4th. And that is true, but for millions of Americans, that did not signify freedom. That is what's so important about Juneteenth. Juneteenth is not only the Emancipation Proclamation, but it removes that asterisk from July 4th. And now Juneteenth means that all Americans are free. And that is what is important about Juneteenth. It is now my honor to read the proclamation. Whereas Juneteenth celebrates the evolution of our country to a more perfect union. And whereas Juneteenth began in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, when U.S. General Gordon Granger and 2,000 Army troops arrived to announce and enforce the emancipation of slaves in the South. Whereas Old Central Cultural Center and the University of Texas Medical Branch is holding its 41st annual Juneteenth celebration at the historic Ashton Villa, which was constructed in 1857 and served as the headquarters for the first Confederate, then Union armies during the Civil War. And whereas the Emancipation Proclamation was delivered to the head of the Union Army stationed at Ashton Villa and read to the Galveston community from several locations. And whereas the Galveston Juneteenth Coalition is celebrating the 41st annual Al Edwards Juneteenth event at Ashton Villa on Friday, June 19th at 10 a.m., and will be honoring the great legislative work by Al Edwards in getting approval of the Juneteenth state holiday in Texas, signed into law by then Governor William Bill Clements on June 13, 1979. Whereas former State Representative Al Edwards died in Houston 6 weeks ago, therefore we, the mayor and city council of the city of Galveston, are honored to say we proclaim June 19, 2020 as former State Representative Al Edwards Day in the city of Galveston. Thank you.
Good morning. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Galveston NAACP. Happy Juneteenth. June 19, 1865, 155 years today. The day slaves in Texas first learned that they had been freed under the Emancipation Proclamation. Today is a celebration for all. 1980, 40 years ago, Representative Al Edwards was determined to use any means he knew how to make June 19th a state holiday. This was his best-known legislative accomplishment during his freshman term, when he authorized this bill commemorating June 19th, a state holiday in Texas. Our next step is Juneteenth becoming a national holiday. Then Representative Al Edwards joined forces 41 years ago with Reverend Councilman James B. Thomas and others to form many great Juneteenth celebrations right here in Galveston, where it all began 155 years ago. I challenge you, number one, let us join together to keep the legacy of Juneteenth alive, and also join in the vision of our national NAACP, which is to ensure a society which all individuals have equal rights without discrimination based on race. My challenge too to you, let us make our voices be heard. The way to send a message to our society is to get out and vote. Get others out to vote. He did what it took to get this bill passed. Let's follow in that same pathway, determination. Get people registered to vote, and let's make sure our voices are heard. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Good morning. I'm here representing the Old Central Cultural Center and all the board members and everybody that's here on behalf of Old Central, the first black high school in the state of Texas. First of all, we want to give our condolences to Al Edwards' family. Then second of all, we want to thank Al Edwards for his tireless efforts to make sure Texas became the first state to celebrate Juneteenth as a holiday, and that bill was also co-sponsored by a Galvestonian named Doug McLeod. And that shows you how people of different races can work together and get things done. So that was so very, very important. Then I want to thank certain people such as UTMB. They've always partnered with us for years. I want to thank the Galveston Historical Foundation. I want to thank the Sullivan Foundation. I want to thank the Mitchell Foundation, because those people have been instrumental in us being able to do the events that we do. And so we give a heartfelt thanks to them. And then I want to give thanks to the thankful. Sometimes some people will relate to them as the thankless, but to me, they're the thankful. And I thank them like the two people I got handing out masks, Miss Alice Gatson, also Miss Jolene Reese Henley. You notice I said Henley? That means that that's my beautiful wife. So she's up there also. But it goes without question that Juneteenth was based upon everybody coming together. And as you can look around here today, you see a coalition of people here. And it's so very, very important that we continue to work together, to be together, but most of all, to love each other. That's the most important thing that we can do. And I would be remiss without thanking Mr. Doug Matthews for his 41 years of service for this event and all our Juneteenth events. I know he had to go to a meeting, but also Dr. Ben Raymer of UTMB. Been very, very helpful and instrumental in us. There are three things that I would like for you to take away from here today. Remember, they all happen in November. We have the census coming up. Remember, you don't count if you're not counted. So make sure you're counted. Second of all, there's the election in November. That's one of the most political and important elections that you have, because people died, paid poll taxes for you to have the right to vote. So here's your opportunity to show those people, your ancestors, how much you cherish what they did for you. And the third and final thing I'll leave with you in November is my birthday. Thank you.
Next, we will have greetings from the Galveston County Commissioner Stephen Holmes, who for the past 20 years has served as commissioner. He is a Rice University graduate, TSU Thurgood Marshall Law School graduate, and the second most famous football player to come out of Dickinson High School. After Commissioner Holmes, we will have our Galveston County District Attorney, Jack Rody, to bring greetings. His name is not on the program, but since I'm the master of ceremony, and we were honored to have him, and he's been a great district attorney, so he's going to follow. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I've really got 5 words on my mind this morning. The first 2 are, Happy Juneteenth, everybody. And given the times that we're living in, the next 3 words are Black Lives Matter. Let me say a big thank you to Doug Matthews. You know, a lot of events have been canceled all around the county this year because of COVID-19, but Doug made sure this celebration continued this year. Doug, I appreciate all the work that you do for us in our community here. I want everybody to really realize where we're standing, the ground that we're standing on, and the history that's here at Ashton Villa. General Gordon Granger coming, 1865, 155 years ago, freeing all the slaves in the South. This is really a special place to really be. You know, Juneteenth for many years has been a very, very exciting celebration, not only for African Americans, but for all of us in all of our communities. And they celebrated the promise of this country that all men are created equal. And it was a happy time. But this year, we're tinted with some sorrow. Sorrow because Al Edwards is not here. Every year, this was not his district, but every single year, he came to our Juneteenth events. He showed his face. He stayed the whole time at the banquets. He did all that stuff. He came to our breakfast. He came to this celebration. And we're saddened that Al is not here, but we're thankful at the same time that Al Edwards took the time to make sure that Juneteenth became a state holiday in the state of Texas. So we here in the city of Galveston, we could have our celebrations on a state holiday. I'm looking forward to as well, our members of Congress, and to Juneteenth becoming a national holiday. So everybody all across the country has an opportunity to celebrate. This celebration is also tinted with sorrow because of the lives of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. But there is hope. Hope for the protests and the demonstrations that are going on. Hope that social justice will occur in this country, and it will occur soon. And that same hope that those freed slaves has, that these protests will result in all men being created equal in this country, living up to its promise to everybody. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I bring you greetings this morning from me and my wife, Nisha, and from everyone at the Galveston County District Attorney's Office. Two quick things. I know it's hot. One is we celebrate this day because the order and the Emancipation Proclamation, they declared these truths, but we celebrate the hands and the feet that made those truths into a reality in our country, and we honor the work that they did. But we know that there is a lot of work yet to be done in this country for equality and for justice. And so we have to continue that work. Second thing is this. I know that with everything going on in our country right now, there are so many people that are tired and frustrated beyond description at where we are and how far we haven't come and all that lays before us. I could share this with you. Scripture tells us, don't grow weary in doing good, for in due time you'll reap the harvest if you don't give up. So let me encourage you that we don't, working together, we don't grow weary, because in due time, if we keep working together, we will reap the harvest if we don't give up. God bless y'all.
Next, I would like to read a letter from U.S. Senator John Cornyn. His regional director, Jay Guerrero, was not able to attend today, so I will read the letter. And it says, Dear fellow Texans, on this day, 155 years ago, U.S. Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, to make an historic announcement. The Civil War that had ravaged the nation for 4 years was now over, and that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed. The shackles of oppression had been cast off, and all slaves were free. The 155th anniversary of this monumental day comes to 2 months after the passing of one of Juneteenth's biggest supporters. Former State Representative Al Edwards was a civil rights pioneer who established Juneteenth as a state holiday in Texas and spent his entire life dedicated to the cause larger than himself. I'm honored to have known him. This past year, I'm proud to have worked with Representative Sheila Jackson Lee to further commemorate General Gordon Granger's momentous announcement with legislation to establish the Emancipation National Historic Trail from Galveston to Houston. And as always, it was my honor to bring this important holiday to the nation's capital once again with a Senate resolution to commemorate Juneteenth nationwide. I am happy to join you in celebrating Juneteenth, and I pledge to continue to work each and every day to ensure all Texans can live freer lives for generations to come. May God bless the great state of Texas, and may He bless the United States of America. Sincerely, John Cornyn. And just a point of information, in 2015, Senator Cornyn was here for celebrate our 150th anniversary, along with the Congressman Weber and other state officials. Okay, woo! Now, we are honored to have U.S. Congressman, my good friend, Randy Weber, who has celebrated with us many times, including the 150th anniversary, followed by, after he speaks, followed by Rebecca Briscoe with the U.S. Census Bureau.
I think I'm going to break away a little bit because I want to be clearly seen in my comments, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's great to be here with y'all today as we celebrate that 155th anniversary of Juneteenth. We will commemorate the last enslaved African Americans in the United States being declared free. Actually, I'm going to give you a little history, a little bit different perspective, because Abraham Lincoln actually did the proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation, according to Wikipedia, and you know, if you read it on the web, it's true, right? September 22nd, 1862, it was to take effect January 1, 1863. Now, we're going to do a little math here. Our good friend Al Edwards, and I think that I was so glad the pastor prayed for the Edwards family. I served 2 terms. You know, I have the dubious distinction of being a freshman rep with Al Edwards. Now, I didn't come in the early 60s or 70s, wherever it was, but he came back in with me in 2009, and we served 4 years together in the Texas House. What a great guy he was. We got to ride together to different events, and don't you wish Congress would work together like that, by the way? Can I get a witness? Go on now. I'm going to pass an offering hat around here, so I got to get y'all geared up. So he was a great guy, gentle giant, and the 3 powerful committees he served on, and let me tell you, he was quiet spoken, and some of y'all know this. He had a really, beneath that intelligence and the powerful committees he was on, he had a great sense of humor, quiet, a little sarcasm every now and then. I loved it. We prayed together multiple times. Well, the news of freedom, the proclamation didn't reach Texas, as we all know, until June 19th, 1865, when General Gordon stood right up there and read the Order 3. And I'm going to quote it. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are freed, end quote. Now, remember I said we were going to do some math. Juneteenth, 1865. Anybody remember when President Lincoln got assassinated? 1865. He died April the 15th, tax day. He was shot April 14th by John Wilkes Booth. He's taken to a house across the street where he died, I think 7:22 a.m. the following morning. He did not live to see that proclamation furthered and proclaimed, those words from right there. Every day we ought to live every day as it's important, because that was barely 2 months, you might as well say. These powerful words took place right there in Galveston, Texas, took our nation by storm. June 19th, as you know, we call Juneteenth, is forever a day for us to celebrate and recognize. It should be a day that inspires all of us. For many years, and by the way, my grandmother had a saying, and let me just say, some of the previous speakers today have said, with all that's going on in our country, we ought to be engaged, we ought to be voting, we ought to take notice. My grandmother used to say, Randy, what good does it do to sit up and take notice if all you do is sit up? Do something. And that's what we're about, doing something, making a difference. Well, come on now, I've got to get that hat ready. For many years, my staff and I had the joy of participating in the Juneteenth celebration, as Mr. Matthews alluded to. It is an absolute honor to be here. Thank you for that invite, Doug. Although Texas has been celebrating this since 1865, this Juneteenth is not the same as the last we've celebrated in the past 40 years because of Al's passing. This statue back here really doesn't do him justice. What a gentle giant among friends, among Americans he was. Can we give Al and the Al Edwards family a hand? The unity and brotherhood displayed in our Galveston community each Juneteenth is remarkable. I'm going to grab a little water here, trying to come up with a dry throat. Thank you. The knowledge of sacrifice and commitment that goes hand in hand with liberty and equal rights ought to propel us forward. Let's do more than sit up and take notice. Let's get involved. Compels us to remember, vote, Call out injustice when you see it. I thank you for y'all's commitments to your brothers and sisters. We all ought to have that commitment. The remembrance of Juneteenth is of great national significance during this time now more than ever. Think about how important that is. With our country coming to grips with our shared history, we're forever reminded that Juneteenth is not just another holiday. We are ever reminded, as the late Representative Edwards once said, every year we must remind successive generations that this event triggered a series of events that one by one defines the challenges and responsibilities of successive generations. That's why we need this holiday, end quote. Was he right? Was he right? Right. All right, getting all geared up here. Now, a good friend of mine, Sam Collins, had a great, we've been texting back and forth about some different history and some articles being written. He says, according to his maternal grandmother, she said that slavery was in because of men and guns. So it took a war, people. It took a war, people, to make that happen. Let's remember this. It was because of Abraham Lincoln and those courageous abolitionists that weren't afraid to get out of their comfort zone and do the right thing that we even have this day. Now, Al Edwards, bless his heart, and absolutely in his name, I want you to take a moment of reflection to think about Al Edwards. I knew him personally. Most of y'all did not. Most of y'all didn't get to work with him. Senator Larry Taylor, my good friend, we were on the floor of the House when that event that Ben Raymer was talking about happened. Al Edwards was not afraid to tackle injustice. He did more than sit up and take notice. He got in gear. Well, give him a hand, you bet. Each of us has the responsibility to teach our children about that, those lessons of history, men like Al Edwards. Let's teach the coming generations. It's not the things that divide us we ought to be focused on, but that unite us. And then we ought to push out those things in the appropriate manner, those things that divide us. Let us never forget our nation's past. Let us also remember God's grace in spite of historical circumstances, especially during this COVID virus thing going on and all the unrest and turmoil. Let's turn to God to help us remember who we are and where we came from. We can be God's example to future generations by spreading his message of love and forgiveness. Let us lead this nation right now with hope, love, and enthusiasm for the future for all Americans. The evils and oppression of slavery, of racism, have no place in society, not then, not now, not ever. Therefore, we must remember the moments like Juneteenth that have changed our nation for the better. We must grow from here and strive to always celebrate the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those unalienable rights granted to us by our Creator that are the foundation of our nation. And folks, that means life for George Floyd, for Rashid Brooks, absolutely, give them a hand. Everybody, every single person. Let us redouble our efforts to ensure that this happens in the spirit of Abraham Lincoln and our brother Al Edwards to build a more perfect union. Today and every day we must vow to honor the sacrifices of our ancestors and remain committed to the work ahead. I wish each and every one of you a happy Freedom Day. May God bless you. And Mr. President, it is time to make Juneteenth a national holiday.
Adjust my mic just a little bit. Good morning. I bring greetings on behalf of the U.S. Department of Commerce, U.S. Census Bureau. And I'd like to personally recognize the commitment and unwavering support of Mr. Douglas Matthews and Mr. Pete, who has embraced us with open arms to ensure that Galveston is going to get a complete and accurate count. The decennial census is a huge undertaking where I'd like to personally acknowledge our team of efforts. We have in the back our recruiting manager, Mr. Robin Griffin, our senior partnership specialist, Acacia Croft, our media specialist who's been wrangling all the media this morning, Ms. Terry Bryan, our partnership specialist, Tiffany Guillory, and our partnership specialist, Frank Cooper. Today, history was made, June 19, 1865. Over 200,000 slaves were emancipated, freed, and families liberated forever. We at the Census Bureau, we're history makers too, and have been collecting quality data since 1790 under Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. Just as General Granger empowered former slaves, the census provides power and money. Power through apportionment, your congressional seats, and money for programs that we utilize every day, such as SNAP, Medicaid, or hospital districts and education. The best response to the census is a self-response. Filling out your form is easy. In up to 13 different languages. You can complete it on your smartphone in less than 10 minutes. It's safe. Under Title 13, your information is safe and captured and will not be transferred to any other federal agency. Every employee with the Census Bureau takes a lifetime oath with up to heavy fines of $250,000 and up to 5 years imprisonment. In many areas, we're still recruiting. People are looking for jobs. Well, guess what? We're hiring today at www.2020census/jobs, where the pay rate for Galveston is $19 to $21 an hour, plus mileage and paid weekly. Enumerators will start visiting your households this summer in August wearing PPE. So during the global pandemic, I also want to let you know that our operations have extended to October 31st, 2020. So I want to see Galvestonians by a show of hands. How many have completed their census? Okay. And how many have not? Because my employees are going to find you and we're going to capture that information today. Galveston's self-response as of today is 39.1% compared to the state self-response of 55.6%. So in order for cities to qualify for federal grants such as FEMA and hurricane disaster funds, we need to have a population of over 50,000 people. So Galveston, we have some work to do. And my team of employees are here for that. So if you want your teachers to look like the students they teach, fill out the census form. If you want more police officers that look like the communities they patrol, fill out the census form. If you want our first generation college students to have a chance to start and finish college with a degree, fill out your census form. If you want hospital districts such as UTMB to continue to provide cutting edge research and innovation, fill out that census form. And if you want Old Cultural Center to continue to leave a legacy, please do the same. We appreciate your support. And like I said, I have employees that will be looking out for the ones who had their hands up that did not self-respond. So thank you. Oh, Lord, I feel this stuff. Okay.
Next, normally during our celebration, we've had children, our youth participate. This year, because of the coronavirus epidemic, we didn't include the children in the program. So instead, we have invited Rebecca Jimerson, who will portray the historic Harriet Tubman that freed many slaves.
We's free? We free? I'ma spread the word of freedom down Emancipation Trail. I was born in 1822. I was a conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. They call me Moses for leading my people from the south to the north to freedom. If you hear the dogs barking, keep going. If you see the torches in the woods, keep going. If they're shouting behind you, keep going. Don't ever stop, keep going. If you want a taste of freedom, keep going. I had crossed the line to which I had so long dreamed of. I was free. But there was no one there in the land of freedom to welcome me. I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if they only knew they were slaves. To fight slavery, I was a nurse and a cook in the Union Army. I was a spy. I would dress up as a man, and sometimes an old woman. I was a scout. I know this land. I know this sky. I was the only woman, the first woman, to carry out an assault in the Civil War, the Combahee River Raid, freed over 700 slaves. I'd reasoned this out in my mind. There were two things I had a right to: liberty or death. If I couldn't have one, I would have the other. When the sun comes back and the first quail calls, follow the drinking gourd, for to carry you to freedom, 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 freedom. Follow the drinking gourd.
Wow. Thank you. Next on the program, we have the Thomas family members will give the Reverend James B. Thomas Award. For those of you from out of town that don't know who James Thomas was, he was a Galveston City Council member, president of the NAACP, created the summer baseball league organizer. I grew up one block from him and his family, and so he co-sponsored the provided the Galveston support to Al Edwards back in 1979.
Thank you. And again, thank this committee for always giving the opportunity to honor Reverend Thomas, especially you, Doug, since we grew up in the neighborhood together. The most significant thing, and if anybody here is from Galveston, Reverend Thomas had one motto: Black Lives Matter. If you knew him, you know what I'm talking about. We really appreciate them giving us the honor to give this award out for somebody here in Galveston that still hold on to the legacy of what Reverend Thomas was about. One significant thing that we also want y'all to remember about Reverend Thomas, that this day was very significant for Reverend Thomas. The reason for that, it was significant because Reverend Thomas, my family, was slaves to the founder of Galveston. on 155 years ago, my great-great-grandfather was here when Gordon Granger read that statement. And at that time, after that date, our family history tells us that we dropped our slave name as Menard and we became Thomas. So we take this day very seriously. Everybody don't get a chance to know their history. We can't go back that far sometimes, but we're blessed that we take this day very seriously. Can you imagine my grandfather during the Civil War? Abraham Lincoln, we read history, but never think about what were they doing during those times. So Reverend Thomas always had a story. Doug, we always had to shut it down. So we finna shut it down again because that was Reverend Thomas' way. So we always come up with somebody that still represent on the level of a Reverend Thomas here in Galveston. We have a one significant gentleman that has been carrying on the legacy almost to the T on some things with Reverend Thomas. Of course, he didn't go to city council, but he came on the school board. He started another league. He's with me, but we started another league for the kids in our neighborhood. This gentleman is also holding on to the history of things that has always happened here in Galveston that is so rich. And right now we're trying to make a value understanding that we gotta keep hold to our history, because a lot of times things are being destroyed and it's taking our history away. So we want to honor this gentleman. We all know him, Mr. David O'Neill. I guarantee you this, I know we didn't tell him. We don't ever tell anybody. But nobody ever, we want to give him his flowers while he lived also. So David, I know you didn't know that we were going to give you this award. We also played on the same Little League team together. We used to beat Doug and them.
Thank you so much. I'm surprised and overwhelmed about this, but I think it's most appropriate that I receive this at Juneteenth. And now I want to thank everyone for this award. I was surprised and overwhelmed by this, and I think it's so appropriate that I received this award on the actual day of the 19th of June. And that the 19th of June is a day of reflection of the great history and understanding the reflection that Galveston was the center of that concentric circle of freedom, education, and arts. It's just I'm somewhat lost for words, and that's usually not my forte. I've always got a lot to say. But again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you.
Hey, now, Lawrence didn't introduce the other two people. Now, this is his older brother, and that's his sister, Paula and Eugene. I'd like to say one other thing about David O'Neill, who just received that award. He is also our treasurer on the Old Central Culture Center Board of Directors. Okay, we're almost through. Next, we'll have Al Edwards' children that's going to speak briefly about their dad. And then I would like to thank and recognize two people that helped me each year during the that's Diana Davison and Kathy Tiernan, as well as our 2020 sponsors that's out in the program. Okay. I think so.
Good evening. good afternoon, or good morning, I guess, depending on the time zone you're in. My name is Jason Edwards. I'm one of Al Edwards' children. I'd like to acknowledge my sister Alana Edwards, my brother Al Edwards II, my uncle David, my mother, Lana Edwards, and my cousin Alfred is here, all from Houston. Of course, like we've said this morning, you know, there's definitely a different Juneteenth. Usually we would be late, but we'd be late because we'd be listening to directives of Dad to get us down here for Juneteenth and bring him. So it is a little different. But we want to thank all of you for wrapping your arms around him for all of those years. There were some times we couldn't make it, and we would hear stories about you all. And there were years that we were here in the 80s when Muhammad Ali joined, and you know, when we were very young kids. And so we've got stories that go back to the very beginning. I had a good conversation with Mr. Matthews, or Dad would call Old Doug, and about the first event that had 12 people, and I think 4 of the people were someone's kids.
Reverend Thomas's kids.
Yeah, Reverend Thomas's kids, right. Well, we'd like to thank everyone on the Juneteenth Host Committee. We appreciate all of you, Galveston, UTMB, all of the elected officials that are here, and all the partners that help make this happen year after year. Dad was very proud. I try not to look at it too much this day because it's only been 6 weeks, but very proud of what you all have done for him here. We'd like to thank the Moody family, who has supported historically over the years, and the Kempner families here in Galveston. And and I think I wouldn't be my father's son if I didn't say Happy Juneteenth. But Dad wouldn't want claps, he'd want it back. So Happy Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth.
So you know, I was with my mother last night, and we were talking about Dad and what got him to this point. And she was talking about when they lived in a small apartment in 3rd Ward, and Dad was involved with civil rights activities and some Juneteenth celebrations, and walked into the house one day and said, "Hey, what do you think about me running for office?" And she said, "You want to get involved with politics?" And so I'm glad she gave him the green light, and from that point forward, we shared him with the rest of Texas and the country. You know, my siblings in Dad's passing talked about Dad's passion in looking at his bio and going through all of his accomplishments. And his passion for politics and his passion for Juneteenth was more of one for education of African American history that was consistently denied in the Texas education system and around the country. I think someone asked me this morning in another interview, what was the role of Juneteenth in today's time? And I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of white Americans and non-black Americans are waking up going, I took U.S. history, but I didn't learn about the Tulsa race riots. I didn't learn about Juneteenth. I didn't learn about Emmett Till, and all of these things that we learn in our household. And so it's an awakening about education reform in this country. I told this story this morning also about Dad. I called him once. He was on the Texas State House floor, and he was upset. And he said, "Son, I just had to defund and hold up the funding for the Texas Department of Education. Now, I hope I'm not stepping on toes, but you know who my dad is, and you know, I'm just doing what I think he'd want me to do." And he said they would not put Barack Obama's name in the history book. They would label him the 44th president everywhere in the history book, so we just held up the funding. So I think in the role of Juneteenth in today, it's a never forget moment for us. It's a never forget moment for everybody, whether you're white or black, and what has to be done and what wood still has to be chopped in this country around education, which is the root of misguided values. and it allows America to turn a blind eye to what happened in this country. The whole forget about it, but we never can forget 9/11. Like, you know, there were some other things that happened that were catastrophic in this world, like the Jewish Holocaust, the African slave trade, and other major events, and we will never forget. I will say this, Dad always, when we were kids, we would talk about votes, elections, every election, no matter what election it was. I remember I told Miss Lee, Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee, when I was in St. James, I remember her talking to Dad about trying to win her first election. Votes matter. Sheila and Congressman Lee and Congressman Green are treasures to our community. And Dad would always say in his elections, in those later years, Jason, in my district, there are 150,000 eligible voters. About 50,000 are registered to vote, and about 10,000 voted. These are statistics that we heard over. So we can protest in the streets, but we got to protest in the polls. It's too early. No. I whispered to my sister and said, "Hey, are you getting up to speak?" She said, "No." And when I spoke to Doug, he said, "Are you going to speak?" I said, "I don't know." And my brother was not sure also, because it's only been but we're extremely proud, and we thank all of you. We're here to say, through numerous phone calls and conversations, that Juneteenth USA, which Dad founded in 1985, now has a new board of directors, my brother, my sister, and I, and we'll be expanding that to carry on Dad's legacy of advocacy around education reform and education about Juneteenth and other Black history in this country and around the country. So they've put me as president in this first transition, and we're going to rotate. So we look forward to engaging with the community, carrying forward the legacy, and never forgetting. Thank you. We're bringing my brother Al Edwards a second for brief comment.
Good morning and happy Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth.
I tell you, it's this is a different Juneteenth than the previous 41 for me. The first one, I was 7 years old. My first one as a legal state holiday. A few things I want to say. As Al Edwards II, I think my dad has always sort of pushed me out to learn to speak for him, speak for my younger sister, my sister and brother, because I was the oldest. Wasn't always a role I embraced, but on today especially, this first Juneteenth, since my father has completed his work, I want to say what I think he would probably say, which is thank you. Today, 46 states in this country recognize Juneteenth. And here in Texas, one of the reddest of red states, with a governor by the name of Bill Clements in 1979, on the last day of the regular session, Al Edwards, a freshman legislator, did some horse trading and got the first state recognized African American holiday on the books in the United States. And that is a thing worth celebrating. I want to say a couple of things, but the first thing I want to do is say he began pulling that sled when no one knew it was a sled. But to get it to be recognized with the momentum that it has now, took all of you and all of us and some teammates that ran part of the way and took their rest over the course of those 41 years. It was not his work alone. It was not just my mom and dad at the dinner table or us painting signs and making t-shirts and spreading that word, but it was everyone who recognized the importance and value of our contribution to this country. There's been a series of arguments. The naysayers around Juneteenth will say, why are you celebrating that? It's a black eye, you should be quiet about it. It only indicates that we found out 2 years after the legislation that we had our freedom. And that's the wrong attitude. First, never forget. If you forget that an institution will see your rights enacted and will wait till someone enforces them, you don't need to not know that in 2020, that it also happened 155 years ago. Know it happened then, know it can happen again. That's the importance of recognition, of communication, of extending it generation to generation, of continued passing on of the heritage and its true history. A quick word, Juneteenth was not just a heartfelt benevolence of Abraham Lincoln. While he was one of the most conscientious and decent presidents of our country's history, the Emancipation Proclamation was a strategic military maneuver. It had been threatened a series of times by Lincoln and the ragtag administration at that time in an effort to end the Civil War because of the women who were becoming widows due to the soldiers of the North dying. The purpose of ending slavery was to strip away the economic engine of the uprisings of the South through the sales of their textiles, of the rice, the wheat, the corn, the cotton that we were bringing to market. So the purpose of ending Juneteenth was to end the Civil War. That was its action, that was its outcome. Our freedom was our right, whether it was given to us by kindness, by strategy, or by the true giver of it, which was God, who saw the need and the right for us to stand here today free and to speak our word as it is free, to be truthful freely, and to be disagreed with and to disagree, and to remain that way because we are, as we were then, true citizens of the United States. Those who built it, those whose blood fills this ground, those who stood here and got their freedom on that day, and all their descendants. And this is not just a black holiday, it is our day. It's a day when you, if you're not black and descended from someone who was less conscientious than you, can say, I am better, I've learned, I've improved, I was taught wrong, now I know right. I'm born into a world where I see a person and that person is just like me, no matter what their skin color is. Their rights are my rights, their pain is my pain, and we will all operate on the basis of love and dignity. So Juneteenth is everyone's opportunity to celebrate what the country was and to acknowledge that we are those enlisted to make sure it's never that again, to emblazon it in history, just as we do the dark past of the Confederacy, and to move forward with the country on the basis of our true values and our true character. So on today, my father would say thank you. If 46 states already recognize this as a holiday, if states send employees home, banks close for half a day, we know that this locomotive is going toward the paid federal holiday of Juneteenth in this country. It was our work and our doing on this ground, this actual piece of real estate here in Galveston, Texas. This is where it happened, that African Americans received their freedom in the South, delivered by the word of the U.S. government. It's not to be taken away from us. It's not to be muzzled or silenced or marginalized. It is Freedom Day for African Americans in the United States. It is our day. White, black, Asian, Mexican American, it is a United States holiday, and it needs to be recognized as such, and it needs to be passed into legislation as such. So, thank you, and happy Juneteenth.
For the past 22 years, we used to serve a complimentary breakfast in the ballroom of Ashton Villa. However, this year, because of the coronavirus epidemic, we canceled the breakfast and will be delivering through the local churches here on the island over 900 free boxes of food to senior citizens on Galveston Island. The labels on the boxes will says compliments of our Galveston Juneteenth sponsors. We would like to thank all of the news coverage of our Galveston Juneteenth celebration this year, especially our Galveston County Daily News, which is the oldest newspaper in the state of Texas. 2 days ago, they printed a picture and an article that showed us celebrating Juneteenth in 1980, a celebration here on the front steps of Ashton Villa. And in that picture included the first black police captain, Leon Lewis, myself. I was assistant city manager back then, Galveston Mayor Gus Manuel, Al Edwards himself, the Miss Juneteenth, Galveston State Representative Doug McLeod, who co-sponsored the bill, and Reverend James B. Thomas. We would like to thank all of the news coverage of our Galveston Juneteenth, especially the Galveston Daily News. And now we would like, the last thing on the program, we will have the benediction and then the reading of the General Order Number 3 by Major General Gordon Granger. Thank you very much.
Let us bow our head in prayer. Father, we come now saying thank you for the people that you've gathered this morning through your Holy Spirit. We thank you for the presenters, all that have spoken, and you've spoken through them. But most of all, we thank you for your presence and the auspices of the Holy Spirit. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto all of us. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Let us all say amen. Amen.
On June 18th, Major General Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas with thousands of United States troops. Both the troops that you would expect and also United States colored troops, mainly from the Chicago area. The piece of paper and the words didn't grant the freedom. The projection of force granted the freedom. This is a copy of one of the originals of the bills that he had. There are 4 general orders on it that were then promulgated throughout Texas. They were telegraphed across, and they were carried by the Galveston Daily News. The most important one for us is the 3rd general order. Headquarters, District of Texas, Galveston, Texas, June 19th, 1865. General Orders Number 3. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free.
This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and to work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere, by order of Major General Granger.
Happy Juneteenth. That concludes the program. Thank you.
I'm going to switch mics, would you? So I'm going to switch mics.
Maxine!